And I've been wrong plenty in the past because I was a vegetarian and a vegan and teaching in the public sphere, turning elderly lunch programs into like veggie-based, plant-based stuff years ago before it was a thing. I have blood on my hands. I was wrong. And I paid the price personally. And then I did all this research and I'm working with people. And honest to God, rubber hits the road in the real world. And if you experiment with this in your real life, truth starts to reveal itself and you find yourself feeling like you're unmoored because our culture is so bent on thinking plants are safe and benign that it's really uncomfortable for people. And that social psychological dissonance keeps people afraid to question these rudimentary beliefs that are completely, it's like, I think of it as like mold hyphae in our heads. Like we're so embedded in this thinking that we're trapped emotionally.
You quickly touched on your story there, the fact you were plant-based and had your own health challenges given that diet and your health journey at that point. Let's get into that. Let's talk about your diet over the years and when you hit a wall with your health and then what you've done to pivot.
Well, I was a goody two-shoes little kid. I loved my vegetables and fruits, and we were from a cook-at-home family, and my grandfather was really crazy into fruits and cooked beautiful pastries, and Mom had apple trees and cherry trees and rhubarb and green beans growing in the yard. And my sister and I used to play with the rhubarb and eat it. Rhubarb is insanely high in oxalates, right? And my mom would make rhubarb crisp, and I would get as much as you could with a family of 7 people. I would make sure I got the rhubarb. I love these kinds of high oxalate foods. And I already was having problems as a kid. I had ear infections and strep infections. I might have been born with oxalate poisoning, as far as I know. Had my tonsils out. By kindergarten, I was into nutrition and preaching, we're supposed to do this, we're supposed to do that, because I really wasn't interested in being sick. I wanted to be perky and healthy and free of pain and no more ear infections, because then you can't go in a swimming pool when you have ear infection, and that ruins a child's life, right? It's not good. So, by 7th grade, I had decided to study nutrition. And at that same age, I was starting to get back pain and issues. And then in college, I got this foot problem that did not quit. And I ended up being told I was just to take lots of ibuprofen and that they didn't know what's wrong with me. And I did eventually get off the drugs and the orthotics and sort of recovered from the surgery and all this stuff. But it was really devastating to spend my 20s. I had to take a long leave of absence from Cornell, where I got my nutrition degree. And I never could learn to dance. I had to give up any hopes of playing racquetball or ultimate frisbee or doing normal stuff. Luckily, I discovered yoga, and that saved my ability to have some kind of physical life. And then, things got worse. I developed chronic back problems that didn't quit, and fatigue, severe fatigue all through my 30s. And when I quit being a vegan, I added the sweet potato as my starch, because the reason I quit is because I could no longer tolerate beans and wheat. It was making me wiped out and giving me boils on my skin, and I didn't know why. And after I put in the sweet potato in my diet, I developed some other weird things, including lots of wrinkles on my face, like all these little crow's feet, and this little growth on my head and little age spots. I didn't know what they were. Big knot in my back near the rhomboids by the shoulder blades that at night would just really ache and make it hard to sleep. I never associated that with adding sweet potatoes in, but later on, fast forward, I'm 49 years old, and I finally get serious that I need the slow oxalate diet because I had an attack of vulvar pain in 2009, and that clued me in that somebody thinks oxalate's this kidney problem that we put kidney patients on. Somehow oxalate's related to vulvar pain and pelvic problems and connective tissue problems. I have connective tissue problems. I don't have kidney stones. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. So it took me a while to figure this out. But finally, at 49, I realized that my lifetime of arthritis, I started getting arthritis as a 12-year-old and have had it so bad during my vegetarian years. It was terrible. My fingers would swell up. Every joint except my spine would show up with arthritis. One time I couldn't turn the key in the doorknob because I didn't have the strength to turn a key. I was 19 years old. So here I am, 49, fast forward 30 years, and it's like, holy cow, you mean all that horrible arthritis was from my healthy food? I was like, oh crap. I did not want to do this low oxalate diet because I had this sleep disorder at this point. My brain was waking up 29 times an hour, and I was sure I must have some form of SIBO and endotoxemia causing the sleep disorder. So I was trying to deal with that. And now I'm like, wait, I don't want to do this arthritis thing because I got this sleep thing. Like I was not happy about arthritis and oxalates and having to do that. So I did it. And I was 10 days later now reading the mail. My brain was turning back on. I could tell my sleep was getting better. And all kinds of things started going away. And then by the following June, I was wearing heels for 8.5 hours, 7.5 hours at a wedding. And I'm like, why am I not in agony? Why am I in these heels? How did I do? I've never been able to do that ever. And so I was like, I thought I had like 15 things wrong with me, autoimmune diseases, you name it. And it turned out the only thing I really had was oxalate poisoning from being a goody two shoes and eating great food.
Well, this oxalate message, even with you and putting your book out here and spreading the message, is still relatively unknown. So what in 2009, who was talking about this? How did you figure it out?
Yes, praise be to Joanne Yant, who founded the Vulvar Pain Foundation about 31 years ago. And these gals who suffered with this vulvar pain, it's unbelievably debilitating. They can't sit. Sometimes you can't walk. Like it's so bad. I mean, it is evil pain. And they do things like they cut out the glands at the opening of the vagina. Then they take a laser and they laser off the surface of the vulva. And then they do it again and again. They don't have any treatments for it. And she hooked up with a guy. She was amazing. And they tested her urine and found high oxalate spikes in her urine. And they decided we should try to control oxalate exposure. And lo and behold, it took care of the vulvar pain. And then her fibromyalgia cleared up and her connective tissue cleared up. And she founded this foundation and has this website. And so when I had my vulvar pain attack, which was only 3 days, like I don't even begin to know what they suffer with. I could only take it for 3 days. And I was like ready to have like a genital ectomy. Like, I don't want this to happen. And so she clued me in, but I didn't understand. And her knowledge wasn't what I have managed to pull together really deeply studying the literature. So it didn't explain this bioaccumulation problem that I could go off my sweet potatoes and sort of feel okay, but whatever, then it didn't really make a difference. And then I added sweet potatoes back in again, and that I didn't feel bad from eating them when I put them back in. And what I didn't understand is the body has a body store now. We actually are all building up oxalate in our bones, in our thyroid glands, and tendons, our kidneys, and we all die with a condition called nephrocalcinosis, which is diffuse oxalate crystals all through our kidneys. And you can live fine and have this and just die with crystally kidneys. You can have a placenta full of crystals and no one says anything about it. You can have fat buildup full of crystals and nobody tells you that your crystals are full of oxalate in your fat. Like, it's not discussed, so you don't know what's happening. And so she didn't understand this bioaccumulation. And it's very important to know about it. Because when I went on my low oxalate diet and I got really maniacal, like I'm not eating the enemy, I was not necessarily always feeling well. That's because I'm full of oxalate. And once you've quit eating that, the body's like, finally, it's winter. Finally, we're out of the rhubarb patch. Finally, we can get it out of the thyroid gland or the kidneys. And that brings on inflammation and more symptoms. So you don't know if you're feeling better on the diet. And when you add back in your sweet potatoes, it tends to turn off that inflammation of the oxalate clean out process. And then you feel better when it stops doing that. And so you think, well, oxalates aren't my problem. And you're wrong. So I was wrong about that too.
So when it comes to the vulvar pain, is it actually crystals building up in the tissue that cause the pain? Like, do they know the physiology and the anatomy and mechanism, what's happening there? Because, I mean, as you're telling the story, that's what I'm picturing, because we're talking about these oxalate crystals as part of the story. And It sounds painful, but do they know exactly what's happening?
They don't, because it's little old Joanne. She doesn't run an institute at NIH. She doesn't run a university lab. She's not respected in literature and science. And so all of us, probably hundreds of thousands of women who occasionally get crotch pain, and men too. This could be scrotal pain. It can be any kind of, remember heaviness in the loins, like inflammation in the loins. That's the genitals and the pelvis, is a problem with oxalates and has been for all of human history. And science doesn't seem to know that. And so they haven't been interested in the mechanism. They're only interested in trying to discredit the one paper that Dr. Solomons wrote. He was the one who worked with Joanne Yon, who founded the Vulvar Pain Foundation. So they try to discredit the connection between vulvodynia and oxalates and have shown no curiosity, which is fairly irresponsible from the viewpoint of us who have hurt ourselves on the high oxalate diet.
So coming back to your story, it sounded like within, I think you said 10 days when you went on a low oxalate diet, you started to have symptom relief. How quickly did things start to turn around for you?
Yeah, it was pretty clear once I really knew what I was doing and did it really well, that things were shifting in my body. And it took me a long time to recognize other things that were getting better. The whole healing process can be a lifetime. You can have oxalate crystals embedded in your spinal discs, like I probably do. I'm sure all of my vertebral bodies are full. I know my thyroid has struggled mightily with oxalate in them, and you can create an inflammatory condition because nanocrystals in tissues is very inflammatory. Any nanoparticulate, think about asbestosis, where you breathe in nanofibers. That turns on inflammation in lungs that can kill you, and you need a lung transplant to survive that if you survive. This is what's happening, not just in lung tissues, happening anywhere that nanocrystals of oxalate are forming and getting stuck in tissues. And the longer you maintain the high oxalate diet, the more of this particulates are forming in the body. The confusing part is that the body's so clever that it tries to wrap these crystals up in ways where they don't have any symptoms, right? So the body is protecting you from it. So you can have absolutely no symptoms and be loading yourself with oxalate problems. And we see this in the primary hyperoxaluria literature, where people's oxalate are coming from the genetic defect. They often have very little symptoms for a long time, not so much with the newborn infants that are expressing the disease right at the point of birth. They'll usually, if they find out within the first 3 to 6 months, that baby rarely lives to past about 14 months old from oxalate poisoning. But others will show up in midlife, even 50 years old, and have the only symptom they show up with is neck pain. Neck pain, shoulder issues, dental pain, sinus problems, all kinds of things that can be just oxalates and not know it. So the body's busy protecting us from nano and micro particles that can be forming in our tissues, and you don't know it. So by the time you're 49 and getting rid of your sweet potatoes and your chard, you have decades of doing rhubarb. And I was a vegetarian and a vegan. I was into beans and stuff like that, full of the lectins. And Dr. Gundry is not wrong about lectins. Lectins are trouble. And just a little, hats off to Dr. Gundry. I, from Cornell, did not know that you're supposed to soak your beans for 3.5 days and then pressure cook them in order to disarm lectins in beans. I didn't know that going to Cornell. You take 6 or 7 hours of food labs, and you don't learn this in food labs. You learn how to make a gluten ball. You learn some really stuff that seems esoteric. You don't learn that beans should be properly prepared because of the lectins in them. So you can't trust people with PhDs and MPHs and bachelors in science and nutrition, because what we're learning in school is missing so much information about the plant compounds that are causing trouble. We're not in academia curious enough about the Joannes and the Sallys of the world. Why do they solve unsolvable modern maladies by just switching a few foods around?
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
People are literally buying these massive clamshell boxes of spinach and using half pound or more of spinach every day. That is really toxic. I was looking back at this thing that I really love. I wanted to share this with you.